So welcome everyone. A formal welcome to all of you on this Ask Me Anything session with Abhishek PR, who is a engineering leader at Q at CRED. Uh, Before I start, a huge shout out to BrowserStack, who are our premier sponsor for all our conferences and exclusive sponsor for all our community events. It's due to companies like BrowserStack that we're able to do so many events consistently. With that, I'll introduce Abhishek to all of you. Abhishek is an engineering leader QA at CRED, and before CRED, he has worked with marquee companies like Swiggy and Flipkart. That's why he's one of the best possible people to understand testing in highly paced environments where the agility is very high, where the release cycles are very short and agility is very high. So with that, let's welcome Abhishek on stage. Hi Abhishek, you're on stage. Okay, thank you Abhishek for doing this, and we really hope to learn a lot from you about testing in highly paced environments. So let's just start. So Abhishek, the first question is, how do you manage quality and thoroughness in your testing while working under tight time constraints in a company like CRED, where the release cycles are fixed? Okay, this time release has to go on, or like Flipkart or Swiggy, where the release times are fixed. How do you ensure quality and thoroughness in that when the time constraints are a little tight?
Sure. I think this is the more asked question. What I think, right? It's also obviously this is the first question where you would be asked, like in any startup, where you work, right?
Correct.
So at least my journey was more into the startups, being into from the scratch, and where I had been working in almost all the startups in my journey. I think this was the first thing. Obviously, any QA or anyone need to be looked at, right? I think the way, at least if you ask me, like how I would go is like more of one is like have the detailed understanding of your requirement doc, right, and also maybe understanding of the domain, making it more understanding of the domain quicker, either interacting with the different stakeholders or like developers or the business folks, so that you get the context quickly and prioritize the things what exactly you need to be testing it, right? So uh, mainly prioritization of the task would come in picture when you work under very high paced testing, right? So and also obviously your test data should be created beforehand when you're
Correct.
starting with the QA, right? And once your test data, all your configurations, everything should be ready, so that you can plan accordingly whatever the resources like you have and the timelines, how it is being associated based on the priorities and the business commits what you have in the company, right? And also just not this, right? And also there are also like some of the things like uh, uh, where you have also released like some of the features where you learned some of the thing, you have done retrospectives, you have took some of the learnings, but we need to
Got
start
it.
adapting those learnings so that it would be beneficial for next releases when you're working with the next releases, right? So
Got it.
I think these are the some of the action items when you take from the retros and start improving into your next sprint plannings. Then some of the things would also help you out, like how do you prioritize, how do you need to like finalize the scope of the testing and start
Got it.
plan accordingly, right? So yeah, I mean, this would be my approach, right? Like getting into the test data and prioritizing your task based on the risk assessment, right?
Got it.
And also like interacting with the different stakeholders to understand more in detail, so that you create probable combinations what needs to be tested and go with
Got it.
it, right? And
Got it.
obviously consistency comes when you have like domain knowledge, when you have like different checklist planned, how you need to go about for every release. So that's how at least like you can prepare your checklist learnings on the action items what you need to follow in the next sprints.
Got it. Got it. Understood. Understood. I think great points. There's a related question, Abhishek, from Yashwant, and I
Mhm.
think this is a very common question in testing industry in general, right? How
Mhm.
do you automate when under tight deadlines? Because automation is there's a pressure to do automation, and we also want to do automation, but deadlines are also tight. So how do we how do we figure out a trade-off between automating and tight deadlines? And in such cases, how is the balance between manual and automation?
Correct. So I think, I mean, it's a good question. I also most of the times get from my team also sometimes, right? But that's where I think where I suggest to the team, it's more of like the time management and planning, right? And consider like maybe if you need to work on, can you just like display the slide of it? Maybe I'm just like
Yeah, just wait.
yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, like
So
balancing both between manual and automation, it's more of the planning and time management, like what we need to more looked into, right? So coming with example, like any feature, like when you're working with what exactly you can automate within the same sprint, right? Yeah.
got
So basically, what exactly like you can automate within the same sprint and keep it automated, and only the manual effort you can keep it like minimal effort, right? During on sprint itself, like where you can start like contributing to the automation, so that you're not creating a backlog of the automation in later, right?
got it.
So obviously, I mean, again, if timelines are very strict and if you need to do, again, there is a call out basically, right? I think, see, basically, you're working as a QA, like you are the responsible for bringing the quality and you are the gatekeeper of it for any feature which is going live, right?
Got it.
Obviously, there should be a call out like you're working on this. It needs so and so time, right? It cannot happen like magic, everything. So it would be done,
Yes, yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I think it's more of like the way how we communicate to the org and the teams and say like, okay, this is what this effort would be needed for doing the manual, minimum set of manual and minimum set of automation, so that we are basically setting that expectation within the teams, right? Why exactly we are taking this, so that
Got it.
folks understand on it. And maybe like still, if something like still you need to prioritize with the tight timelines, then you come up with the approach like what is important for that release, right? Is something like where you can deprioritize the things and prioritize like what is important for the feature, right?
Got it. Got
Yeah.
it. Interesting. I think that's a very interesting answer. There are a lot of questions coming in. I
Awesome.
think you mentioned in the initial data that organizing your test data before it's in advance in itself helps you achieve tight deadlines.
Right.
So Parul has a question that how organizing test data helps in achieving tight deadlines. So if you can deep dive into this.
Sure. So, okay, when you work on very tight timelines, right? So, if your test data is not created or maybe your configurations are not set up, by the time like you get the QA drop and you start setting up the test data or setting up the environment, setting up the configs, obviously it would take time. You don't know what set of other issues would come in when you're setting up something in the environment, right? I think these are things like when you start parallelly working with the teams and setting up the data beforehand, before you start on the QA, I think this would help reduce some of the issues which you come across on setting up the configs, because
Got it.
it's
I
like
think
you also end up like fixing the configs for 1 or 2 days also, right?
yes.
Because you not know the dependencies, how system or feature is being interacted with dependency services.
Got it. And we create this test data. I think that's a very valid point that before we entering into a war, we should have all our weapons ready. The weapons in this case are the test data, the configurations, and stuff like that, right? Important.
And
Uh,
also some
but
of the
yeah,
things, right, like when you before even you start with like to it would also reduce the QA cycles, right? Number of
correct.
QA cycles. And maybe like setting that expectation with the different set of teams, like who would be responsible on setting up configuration, or maybe if QA is owning it, QA is the responsible for setting up the configuration, where it should be again vetted with the product folks, like what exactly kind of prod config you would be taking live with, right? So setting with similar set of configs would also reduce lot of data and lot of like uh, lot of related testing use cases as well,
Got it.
right?
Got
So
it. And how do you create this, manage this data or create? Is it like manually or using some kind of automation to create test data also?
I mean, maybe I would suggest like it would be more of depending on the use case of the feature, right?
Got it.
Exactly you would need for that feature, right? Is it something where you
Got it.
can really generate the things, or where you can write the script and generate the test data for it, right?
Got it.
Where may, I mean, generating just test data is a smaller task, right? Again, where how you're
Got
utilizing that test data to connect to your end-to-end of automation or manual, right? So that should be the more focus rather just generating the test data of it.
got it. Got it. Okay. Now again a similar question. Again a little deeper question. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you because there are a lot of testing activities a release will demand, right? They'll demand performance testing, they'll demand functional testing, they want security testing, they want penetration testing, a lot of testing types. Okay.
Yeah.
How do we prioritize our testing activities when there are when the timelines are short and when there are multiple sub projects or tasks which require immediate attention? So how can we do that?
Got it.
I'll
So
just type the question in chat also so that you have full clarity. Yeah, yeah,
okay, sure. Got it. So yeah, again, when you have like multiple tasks and multiple related, obviously again time constraint is the one which we always have, right, for the QAs,
correct.
which comes at the end moment for the QA, and yes, you need to deliver this by so and so dates, right? I think it's more of like you understand basically the priorities of the project, what exactly it needs to be delivered, and what are the set of, again, you can also again follow the risk based approach which I have talked about, right? What exactly you would be prioritizing, and taking like, again, you can take a bet like what exactly things you can still take it as a risk, where you can do once it is released into a or something, right? Or maybe you can also plan it out like feature flag related when you
Yes,
when you're going with the production releases, right? And also obviously like have like more of continuous feedback and collaboration within the teams, so that you are also discussing, because obviously we work in the agile model, right? Requirements obviously won't be freezed, right? This is not a waterfall, right? And when you are in the agile, obviously there are like even small changes coming up at the last moments, right? When there are things like that, obviously there should be more of collaborations within the teams, and continuous like feedbacks and adaptations, like how exactly like you're following within the teams, right? And it's more of like it's more of like you're keeping the team up to date, like what is happening within the progress of the task, right? And
got
also obviously like considering maybe like user impact and the kind of like launch impact, how these features would be launched. You can also take the
got
data based on that, right? And
got
also
it.
things which you can also think of like parallelizing your testing. Example, like if you want to do load performance testing, functional regression, everything. So maybe obviously like you can cover utilize your automation techniques, automation suites for running your regressions, right? And load testing, maybe you can maybe like, I mean, again, see, load testing would not take much time, where again it depends on to the org, to company, but still performance testing you can take it as a parallel, right? Because performance
Got it.
is not something which consumes lot of your time, only it it takes your time during execution, right? But just building the scripts and creating it should not take much time of yours, right? So
Got it.
yeah, I mean, did I answer the question,
No,
or
I think it helped. I think you gave multiple frameworks about how to decide priority, and I think it depends from context to context, companies to
right,
company. But I think
right.
the framework in general would help. I think people would agree with me. If people have any follow-up questions, of course they will. There are so many questions coming in. I think we mm, we'll have to take a lot of community questions also. Uh, there is a question. This we have taken. Okay, take correct test data. Okay, this one I wanted to ask you. This one. Okay, how to deal with a situation where development teams or devs deliver the case module so late in the sprint, which is a very common case, right? It is not a
Yeah.
uncommon case. and how can we ensure quality in that case to the best possible level?
Right. Correct. Yeah, so obviously, when there are modules, when you get QA drops very late in the sprint, whichever was not planned, right? I think it's more of like where QA calling it out exactly like what were the timelines initially agreed upon, right? And what exactly like timelines QA was also agreed upon, right? See,
Got it.
obviously, if something is being delayed, obviously the same delay would reflect on your release cycles, right?
Correct.
Again, it cannot happen like crunching your QA time because QA drops are delayed, right? It's more of like setting that expectations within the team and within the org, why there was a delay, why again it cannot have as a QA delay, right? It's more of like why there was a delay. You would have like clear data why there is a delay from the QA on the QA drop from the dev team, right?
Got it.
And obviously there would be some reason, maybe some enhancements been added or some things would have been added at the last moment, right?
Got it.
Maybe some estimations would have been wrong where
Wrong. Correct.
you need to be making it corrected in the next sprints, right? Where you call
Correct.
out in the next sprint saying that I think there was some delays in the last drops, like how we planned on the sprint planning. Maybe I think we should have start having some buffers in the sprint planning, at least like 20% of 30% of the buffers, like maybe roughly like where you take. Again, these numbers are very relative to
Contextual.
they're contextual and feature wise also. It's just not
Correct.
with company, right? And based on the feature, like where you take some buffers so that you're not exceeding the buffers at least on the QA drops also, so that like you have the better planning and better SOP of it, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
I think makes sense. The answer makes sense. Uh, I have one question. Okay, we have discussed about overall how to maintain quality in tough time constraints. We have discussed about how to prioritize testing activities in when there are multiple projects and which require immediate attention. Now, we all want to avoid reporting critical bugs or bugs which can block releases early as possible. Okay, while in larger organizations, it is still okay to. It's ideally not okay, but it's still manageable that the critical bugs are reported in the end. But in companies which are early stage startups or which work very fast, a critical bug at the end might just delay everything else, right? So how do you, while I understand that it's not possible to always report the critical bugs first and there'll always be leakages which will stay in the end. But from your experience of working with three good startups, how
Mhm.
do you uh, can you share any effective techniques or approaches to quickly identify and report critical issues first in a fast-paced cycle?
Got it. Again, okay. I think few things we talked, not all. For this, maybe yeah, for all the effective techniques and approaches for this, right? So I think maybe like few things which you can also utilize as an your regression automation suits is one of the thing where you can use it. And obviously again using like different set of techniques, what you have like exploratory testing or risk based testing or behavior BDD uh, testing, right? So you can use like different type of testing techniques to ensure like these are identified beforehand, right? And again it's just not just using the testing techniques, it's also from the requirement document phase itself, right? From the requirement doc you can also be part of the requirement discussion, start flagging out the issues where things are not being addressed, right? Because you are the I think QS are the better have good understanding of the end-to-end domain knowledge in the company, right? Where at least I have seen, right? Because QAs are the known like exactly how things are dependencies, how it's been dependent on across different services and how it's been connected across end to end, right? I think we are the right folks like who can call out what is exactly covered, not covered in the PRDs, and even on the solutioning docs. I think it's from every phase of it where QA is involved and QA is calling it out. What are the misses on each and everything, right? Maybe it could be the requirement doc, it could be the solutioning low level or high level design docs, right? And also it could be maybe on before like even coming up with the testing techniques, like what exactly you need to prioritize to for this particular feature, right? And more following like shift left approach, right? Like what exactly like you need to be doing. I think maybe even in test drive conference, like we had a session I think on this more with some of the speakers as well, right? I think it's more of like following the shift left techniques on this, right? I think this would also bring most of the issues at the early stages rather finding at the end of the maybe end of the sign off cycles, right? You're on mute, Ashutosh. Sorry.
I think makes sense. So I think to all of this, a better understanding of the product in general, the changes which are coming in the cycle,
Yeah.
and being better prepared helps us uh, uh, unearth the critical issues from the as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Okay,
And also
now
just
this is a yeah,
sorry,
please.
and also just
Yeah, please
adding,
go ahead.
right? Like even from the solutioning docs, you can also find out the issues exactly like how it is being solved,
Correct, correct.
right? So maybe like that, maybe the right tech stack was not used, or maybe the right approach of solutioning, like calling to different services, like it's not taken the right calls, right?
Got
Maybe
it.
I think it's more of like how much you understand your product in detail. You would be able to come up with a lot of things like where you would be able to flag the things beforehand. All right. It's more of
Got
like
it.
how you see your product with with you, right?
Got it. Got it. Okay, this is a question I think from Nilesh. Because we're discussing PRDs, etc.
Mhm.
How do you because requirement PRDs, requirement documents are generally not are at times not clear. So how do you handle cases where the requirements documents is a little slim, if it's not clear? How do you handle such cases?
Got it. Cool. I think maybe in my journey also I had faced this issues, right? I think what I did for this, obviously, setting up and maybe like just go through a doc, what exactly was written initially, right? Maybe like just list down the things what exactly you don't understand, right? And maybe with the current project, with the current domain, what I have understood, or maybe like if you're new to the team example, right? I'm just taking all the probabilities what would be coming, right? So just like list down the things what you understand from the PRD, and maybe then have an open discussion with the business team and the product team. Try to
Got
understand more in depth of the things, what exact use cases they meant on this. And still obviously like still if you don't have the understanding, maybe you can ask for the mind maps or something like maybe pointers of the requirement doc. If obviously if they can't give like detail level doc, at least like you can say like these are the set of pointers, these are the set of like maybe mind maps which you can share with us, so that at least like you can come up with the test cases and get this reviewed beforehand before you start on
got
the execution, right? At least some of these things would helped me at least like to follow this with the different teams, like when you don't have an requirement doc very clear.
got it. Makes sense. Uh, I think this is a question I think which you will love to answer, but you will because how do you handle the pressure and stress associated in a high-paced environment? And what are the self-care practices do you recommend?
Okay, okay. Sure. I think more of yeah, I mean maybe my journey is into almost into startups. Obviously, like I've
Yeah,
seen this from almost like 8 9 years also, right?
correct.
So, but yeah, like just have your okay, maybe at least like today till date, I keep like every day 1 hour just for my freeness, like either going through the books or maybe watching some comedy, or so that like my mind would be stress free. That's the only thing which I do, right? And other than that, I think it's more of like uh, I'm not maybe good at like doing physical activities lot, doing like gym or all other things, but it's more of like taking free of your mind, like going through some blogs or maybe understanding different businesses or different products what is in the industry, so that at least like it gives you out like some relief what exactly uh, like you need to be focused at, right? Maybe and also obviously like managing your time accordingly, so that I keep like 1 hour daily for it, right? Regardless
Got it.
set of task of it. So
Got
just
it.
like planning out better way, keeping it like more of like positive mindset, whatever is coming in, you just be positive, right?
got
I think that makes you more stress free, being like positive minded.
got it.
Yeah,
Understood. I think there was a recent podcast by by Nikhil Kamath on health, and they said that sound sleep is very important. The 6, 7, 8 hours sleep is very important
yeah,
to stay healthy in general and stay positive in that respect.
yeah.
Okay, Abhishek, this is a question. Okay, very interesting, very philosophical question.
Okay.
See if you want to attempt this. Okay,
Ask.
uh, does QA have less value as compared to other team members in the agile framework? Assuming,
Mhm.
considering you've worked with multiple good startups, most of them are unicorns by now, and what's your thought on it? Considering your career journey, does QA has less value as compared to other members of the agile team?
Sure. Maybe I'll answer from my perspective on this.
Yeah, from your perspective, it should
Not from the
yeah,
industry
it should not be a
perspective.
generic answer, of course. Yeah,
From
thanks.
my, at least my experience and my perspective, obviously not all the places it is like that. Maybe like some places like people feel that they have less valued, but again maybe that would be because of maybe the QA or like the team who works as an QA team. I think it's more of the visibility issue, what I feel.
Correct,
Rather,
correct,
I mean, maybe like if you're feeling maybe QA has less value in the company, uh, then it's wrong notion. I don't think so. No one would have that notion by default, but it's more of like until you show the progress, until you show that visibility, what is happening on the QA, what exactly we are doing in the QA team, then I think it makes more accountability and more importance given to the QA team, right? Example like maybe I'm into the industry, like at least all my journey was into the startups, where I was like second QA or fifth QA or max, where I had been in my journeys. Where I think my main motive always when joining to any company is just ensure like what exactly QA team is, what is the outcome we are bringing into the org, right? I think that is the one, if you showcase to any company, I think company would obviously value on it, right?
got it.
So I think that's the only thing, right? Like what exactly you do, what exactly, maybe either in terms of automation or tools or the processes which you are creating or the SOPs which you are bringing, or maybe the kind of ownership which you are showing on the customer issues, right? Or the ownership which you are showing on even like infra issues or your service level issues, whatever is coming in, how exactly like you are putting your bandwidth to help the team and help the org to grow on this, right? I think the kind of visibility if you show, I think automatically that would come. You don't need to say that QA team is not valued, right?
Got
That's what I believe in, but yeah.
No, no, I completely agree with you 100% on this. That organizations are businesses by nature.
Yeah,
Every organization is a business. They need to understand. They have a cost benefit analysis of every team member, and each team, whether it's a dev team, QA team, documentation team, product team, infra team, they need to communicate their value to the org. If
yeah,
they're able to communicate your value to the org and they accept the value as it is, which you communicate, I think all teams will be valued as much as possible. I think that's a very valid point. It's just about communicating your value to the leadership teams, and that's very, very important.
yeah.
Uh, then this question I have, okay, now because again you work with very speed environments, very highly paced environments. Okay, uh, how do you ensure effective collaboration and communication? Because there is a lot of communications coming in, right? Devs are communicating, project managers are communicating, product managers are communicating, infra team is communicating. How do you ensure that the communication lines are very clear and the communication is is quick, complete, concise, and correct? So how do you ensure communication is with stakeholders is on point?
Got it. So I think it's okay. Maybe like had introduced a lot of processes, at least in the companies where I worked, right? Having maybe like regular stand-up meetings, regular catch-up calls on this, right? Like what exactly like being blocked, what is not there, and also like more communicating on the, maybe like I've used like more of Slack channels rather, and also maybe in my previous companies like where I've used like emails as well, right? But it's more of like communicating more to the teams, proactively communicating to the teams what is the update on the feature what we are working on, and how the release cycles are based on the release cycles plan, like how it is being meted to, right? Maybe like sending it daily status updates, like what is being worked upon, what is the ETS like where we are working on, right? And if there is any like in between some new functionalities being added, what would create an impact on new functionalities being added in the middle of the sprints or in middle of the testing which is in progress already, right? I think it's more of like creating an communication channel, keeping most of the stakeholders up to date what has been happening on the QA, and also
Got
being on the stand-ups, doing regular stand-ups, and doing in retrospectives, and obviously taking learnings outcome of it and implementing it into the next cycles, right? It is just not like discussing and just leaving with it. It's also like you're taking the action items and setting a discussion. And also obviously like if you have any expectation, like clarifying any maybe like obviously one thing, at least some of the things which I've seen in the some of the folks, right? Like we start like assuming the things when you know like little bit about the feature, right? I think it's more of like rather creating an assumption, it's more of like where you're understanding the functionality in depth of it, right? And
got
asking the right questions, even if it is a noob questions, should be fine, but still you can get into the detail of the question until you understand the things, right? And maybe
got
like getting into the deeper understanding, and also maybe like documenting these things, right? It's just not like on the words, it's more of like documenting at some places. Like you can use, obviously like we have multiple tools in the industry today, right? There is a lot of different tools like which you can use it for documenting the things, right? And obviously have like open conversation with your product folks, development team, right? Or any other business or see a customer support team, right? Like eventually like what is happening, like you communicate it. Example, if something like new release being happening, even like you should also inform your customer support team, because they should be
correct. They
help
should
out
be aware. Correct.
queries, right? And that's the kind of like maybe even take as an ownership, like where you drive the demo sessions to the customer support team, right? Take the
Got it.
importance of it, and maybe like driving it, setting that SOPs, what needs to be answered, what needs to be not, right?
Got
It's more of that I would suggest.
Understood. I think that makes a lot of sense. That you have to be very. See, communication is especially in remote teams. I think no communication is less communication, right?
It's more of
No
like
communication is
proactive.
proactive communication. I think that's the key
That
word
would,
here. I
that
think
would solve all, right?
correct.
And also like and also one thing which also I feel like I think people should also start giving the feedbacks, right? Then and there.
Correct,
It's not something
correct,
like
correct.
you reserve the feedback and give it like after a month or 2 months or after right? You
Yes.
when you give the feedback immediately, that would be immediately implemented, right? Either it's implemented or not, but at least you're doing your work what needs to be, right? At least you're calling
I
out the
think
which is not working.
that makes a lot of sense. Or that makes a lot of sense. Uh, I think communication you sorted. Frequent deployments you sorted. Uh, okay. This is a question about, and this is a
Maybe
question
like
from the community also.
on the communication, maybe I can also tell in terms of automation also, right? So maybe like in
Correct.
terms of automation also, where you can also start doing the peer reviews, right? What exactly I mean, maybe like pair testing you can do, and also like testing along with your different peer, right? What exactly
Stakeholders.
how things being automated, and also like start doing like defect triage with the product team, and also keeping that visibility across the org, saying that what is being happened, what we have prioritized, like what is going to the production, what is not, right? It's more of like keeping it very clear what you're releasing on prod, what are the call outs you're doing, what is the release, right?
God, I think that makes sense. Uh, uh, so again, are there any because because when you work with fast environments, you have a lot of things, releases coming in, managing communication, trying to manage documentation. So are there any tools or technologies that you find indispensable for streamlining testing processes, in particular, enhancing productivity in high-paced environments? So any particular tools or techniques which you find really good to manage your testing process in a high-paced environment?
Got it. I think obviously, I mean, we have like plenty of tools today in the industry, right? And also with very different use cases, right?
Correct.
Again, like when it comes to the performance testing, you have like obviously Gatling, you have Locust, you have K6, and you have like JMeter, multiple
Correct.
tools, right?
Correct.
And again, when it comes to automation, again there are many no-code tools and again many like in-house built frameworks too, right?
Correct.
Again, you can test ng or anything like maybe like even into the Jasmine framework or anything of those sort, right?
Correct.
And so again, when again it's very wide. Like what we have in the QA industry, I think we have like different set of tools for every type of testing what we need to do, right? And even when you want to do fault tolerance, fault injection related scenarios, again you have chaos engineering, right? Again,
Correct.
that's very big theme of like where you need to work upon, right? And again, security testing, maybe some orgs is part of the QA, and again, some orgs doesn't have the security testing as part of the QA team, right? And again, apart from testing tools and you also have like test case management tools, right? Like testel, rally, maybe zephyr, right? And you have like
Correct.
multiple
Correct.
of test management tools as well. And again, obviously, again, when it comes to collaboration tools or when it comes to infra related tools, right? Or maybe like infra or logging monitoring tools, you have like plenty of tools, obviously, like where QA should understand the things on each and everything, right? Even when you are doing an validating in the using any logging tools, right? Like Coral Logics or Datadog or anything
Got
new
it.
or anything, right? Maybe like you also need to understand like what exactly being logged from your services or from your uh, app side, right? Like even from app, like if they are printing any logs in your crash free, right? Crashlytics basically,
Got
right?
it.
So you need to know like what exactly being printed, what exactly like how it's able to find out like a root cause when you find an issue, right? It's more of like
Got
how it's even being logged, and is the format right, right? And if something is not right, again there is a lot of there also where you can contribute. Okay, maybe something formatting is not right, or maybe the kind of things which not need to be printed, like PII data should not be printed, but still we are getting it printed, right? I think this there is a lot of things where we can also contribute on the log side also, or maybe different tools looking at where you can also take up the action items on it.
got. That makes sense. I think those are very, very valid points and should really help the community in general. Okay, this is a question from Bairagi. Okay, so when we look at the Cred app, okay, the UI is very, very, very posh, I would say, when we look at there. But it's also very accessible. It's one of the
Yeah.
best UIs from an accessibility point of view.
Mhm.
So, how do you strategize the testing for largely the integration between modules so that the experience is seamless, so that the accessibility is also taken care of? You don't need to share any details inside CRED,
Yeah.
but from a larger perspective, you can share.
Yeah, maybe I'll speak it generally on this.
Generally, yeah, speak it generally. Yeah, that will help.
Can you just post me the question somewhere?
Yeah, once one. Uh, okay, just yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, do we mean by integration between the modules is more of like within the app or within the backend and app? How is it?
I think let's take both the cases within the app and within the backend in the app in general. Because consider it from an accessibility point of view.
Got it. Okay, I think maybe accessibility point of view, again, there are multiple things, right? Where you need to also focus on maybe the designs, the flows, set of flows, like how much fast user can like complete the flows or use the feature, and also maybe the design like design rules, whether it's been followed or not, right? And again, this also goes company to company. Again, it is not same for across different companies, right? Every company has their own way of designing and design rules of it, right? And also obviously when it comes to the accessibility point of view, you also need to look into the how your consumer is like uh, is able to use your feature faster, right? Where
Yes.
they should be able to, example, like just take any UPI payment, right? When you just like scan and just make the payment, it should happen immediate, right? So now there
Got
is
it.
a lot of things came in on the UPI as well, right?
Got
So
it.
uh, obviously, again, when you want to work with like integration between different tools, basically strategizing on when you are working with different modules is more of like uh, you need to understand, obviously, like somewhere you need to draft down the cases, like what exactly you need to execute on both the sides, right? Because like example, if someone is working on back end, someone is working on the front end, or maybe different modules which are being integrated or dependent, right? You need to list down the things somewhere, maybe in
Got
Excel
it.
or maybe in your doc or somewhere, where you just like list down the things, what exactly your use cases would impact your related use cases, and what are the things you need to validate when something came from an upstream service or maybe
Got
came
it.
from an upstream module, right? So you need to clearly list down the things what exactly need to be validated, and what are the, again, maybe like once example, let me just take an example, right? Like of any like Swiggy or anything, right? Like when you do an checkout flow, right? Or maybe like when you do an when you book an when you order a food, basically there is a lot of process goes behind it, right?
Correct. Correct.
Where you have a catalog management, where you get the restaurant menu, and from the menu where you are adding the items to the cart, again there is a multiple
Correct. Correct.
services are involved, and again there is a multiple modules within the app are involved, right? It's more of like you list down the things, example, once I add to the cart, what exactly should happen on the background, right?
Correct.
Are you using any app level cache, or are you using anything on the backend level caching? All right, if something, is it, whenever you add items to the cart, from example like anything, when you are ordering the food, when you add any items to the cart, like what exactly being happening, is it storing in the local cache on the app side? You need to check all this, right? And is it
Correct.
something like saved in the backend DB or backend any caching databases which is being used, right? So every checkpoint you need to validate, so that that gives you better coverage of the end-to-end testing of it.
Got it. I think in the interest of time, because it's too late for you also and for the people also who are tuning in. Um, so I'll just take the one last question. I think that's the common question which is revolving around everywhere. Okay,
Okay.
is how AI will impact the job of testers because you have worked so much and worked in different environments and working in new technology, new age companies. What is your opinion on AI and its impact on testing in general?
Okay. I think there is a lot of opportunity today. Even using AI, we can build lot of tools automated, and also just not automating it, maybe with the current use cases or current test cases, is it right? But there is a lot of where QA also can contribute using these AI tools, where you can also because I also see there is a lot of things where maybe untouched within the org, right? Like maybe like there would be some of the issues, or maybe some of the like customer supported issues or something like this, right? Where you need to also like maybe create a tool, something like create a utility tools, how it works, and help you create a data so that you take the right action items on top of it, right? But
Correct.
again, maybe I think it's a very long thing. Maybe it could affect, maybe in very longer future. Maybe I don't see in next 1 or 2 years, or maybe next 3 years it would affect us. But I think it would still more. We can reuse those things, and we can build lot of things on top of it. That's what I look into it, right? Uh,
Got it.
Maybe I'm also just started exploring on it. I'm not like maybe a pro on doing all this,
Yeah, I understand.
because obviously it's new to the industry, and I'm also exploring on this. I would love maybe if someone wants to contribute on this and do this, because there is a lot of things to do within the QA industry, right?
Got
So
it.
in the QA community there is a lot of opportunity, lot of things. Today, see, there are like plenty of tools, many companies using it, but how to tie up with different set of tools, basically you can use some of these AI tools, if something like where you can stitch the use cases of it and say this how we are doing it in the org, right?
Got
I think it's more of that sense, if you look at, I think you don't need to be worried of even if AI is coming in, right? If you are
I think
used,
that
good. Yeah.
I think like somebody said, right? That you should not be worried about AI, but you should be worried about somebody who is using AI. You should not. So you should be the one who should make others worried
Right.
and have a good chat around all this.
I
Good.
think automation also, when it came, when most of them were our manual QAs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Also, it was like a talk where automation would take away the jobs, right? But
Correct, correct,
no, I
correct.
mean, it doesn't happen, right? Because there isn't, obviously the mind of the QA is more important, right? Because we are the one like who think very different use cases and different corner cases to it, right? Obviously,
Correct, correct,
AI would not to the not to the extent what we do it, what I feel at least,
correct,
right?
correct. I
So
think that is true.
yeah,
I
because
think yeah, please go ahead.
yeah, I mean, like human thinking is very crazy, and you need to think of a lot of different cases. That's where we are good at in the QA, right? I think
God,
that's
God,
where we are standing unique and where we are creating a QA community here.
God. And I think Abhishek is from Cred, and I recently saw a podcast of Kunal Shah with Kailash Nath, who is the CTO of Zerodha. And the opening line which Kunal said to Kailash was that till now technologies always attacked the blue collar jobs. Let's say machines, when machines came in, they attacked the labor force, or in general, they replaced the labor force.
Mhm.
But this is the first time where technologies attack the white collar jobs
Mhm.
in terms of AI. It's a very deadly attack, and we need to be prepared for it. I think that's it, Abhishek, for now. So thank you so much, Abhishek, for doing this. You've been very, very kind. You've been very, very busy. Your phone keeps ringing while you're talking because of the agility you work at Cred with. I think thank you so much for doing this, and I hope and thank you to all. I really hope that it has helped you
Yeah.
in general, and you would have loved it, and you take good learning from this session
I mean, thanks
profile.
for the test drive team, and obviously for you, right? I was never been on to the talks. I think this is my first AMA on this, and that too,
Yeah, I think.
and I'm very honored to do this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. And it was lovely talking to you. See you in the next event pretty soon. Thank you.
Thanks.